Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 152 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So today is random. We talk a lot of things. We talk training schedule, we talk training method, steroid uses. I always seem to talk about in every random show. I have a super cool story from an I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listener. This wasn't something that was like written in. This was a story that I actually got to watch unfold over the course of a few years. And that's actually where the podcast starts. The episode starts touching your feelings, I think. And we talk a lot in this episode about greatness too, and what that means and how to attain it. And so I really think that this is an episode that it fits the name of random show. I kind of just bounce everywhere. I didn't talk about half the things that I had on my list to talk about, but I enjoyed it. It was fun getting to talk my feelings out with you guys again. You know, really, all this podcast is like jiu-jitsu therapy for me. And today is no different. It seems like every time I go into these jiu-jitsu therapy episodes, people really enjoy them. And yeah, let's go ahead and get on with the episode. So I wanted to start this episode with a story, and this is a fun story. It's a story of perseverance. It's a story of success, and it's a story of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So to get you guys prepped for this story, to know where we're at, I want to take you back. I want to say this was about 2 years ago at American Nationals. This was one of the first tournaments that me and my team decided that we were all going to try to go do at one time. We were all going to try to win American Nationals together. And when I say me and my team, I don't mean like my team above me. I mean my school, the people that train at my school. And so we went to this American Nationals tournament. We had a really great experience. I actually can't remember for sure which American Nationals. And if I'm being totally honest with you guys, I don't know for sure that this was at American Nationals, but what happens is as you guys know, I'm a member of TAC team, and there is a point that somebody runs up to me and says, "Hey, you're Josh McKinney, right? From TAC team." And I go, "Yeah." And they go, "Can you coach Han?" And I said, yeah, sure. I don't know who that is. This feels racist. This feels like you're only asking me to coach Han because Mark Vives isn't here. He's also Asian. And you were like, hey, next best thing. Let's get Josh. But I didn't say that. I just said, sure, I'll coach Han. And I go coach Han. And, I don't really remember what happens. He might have won 1 or 2 matches. I know he doesn't win the division, but he really goes out, fights really hard. I was like, I like this kid, Han. He seems tough. Well, he comes up to me after, and typical Han fashion, knowing him now, walks up and says, thank you so much. I listen to every episode of your show. And keep in mind, that still doesn't happen to me a lot. 152 episodes in. It was cool. It was happening to me when I was in Vegas at Jiu-Jitsu Con. We'll get there. But it was, it's not something that was happening to me. I was 30 or 40 episodes in at the time. And this guy came out and acted like I was special, like I had a special podcast and that it had helped him so much and stuff. And I was like, bro, you lost. It didn't help you that much, Maybe it did. Maybe it's still true to the show. But anyway, as we keep going, I get to meet this guy, and I've had a lot of situations like this that the podcast has brought. A lot of people that I have relationships and friendships now that I probably wouldn't have, but he's one of them, and he's at all these tournaments, really committed, really trying hard to be a good jiu-jitsu competitor. You guys met his coach, Han's coach, Mark Vives, just a few weeks ago on the show, so okay, well, he's got the coach to do it. He's tough. He listens to the right podcast. Let's see how far this guy can get, right? And as he continues to go, he starts winning. And like not only winning, like he's winning like weight class and open class. And if we're being honest, we know it's not because of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. It's because he has a great coach. But we can still claim, because Han's the type of guy that'll be like, oh no, it was so you, Josh. And so, yeah, we're going to steal some of his glory. Spoiler alert, he gets some glory at the end of this story. And so he's really starting to get the ball rolling. He's really doing well. I actually visited Chicago after Chicago Open. This is like 4 weeks ago now, and spent a week training at New Breed, which is Mark Vivez's school. That's where the whole Chicago takeover took place. And we got a lot of really great training. Well, I got to train with Han, and I was curious, he's starting to do well at all these tournaments. And I was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to beat this guy down. It's going to be really fun. He thinks I'm really good at jiu-jitsu because he listens to the podcast. Well, like, I start rolling with him. And I'm like, man, this guy's tough as nails. Like, this guy he's going to win Master Worlds. And I've been saying that to him. I've been saying, Han, you're going to do it. You're going to win Master Worlds. It's the big tournament coming up. You're going to win it. Well, like, I actually got to roll with him. And I was like, oh, I usually am just lying when I tell people that. This dude's going to win Master Worlds. And he, let's fast forward. Let's say just last week now, we're at Master Worlds. I check my phone. Oh my gosh, Han's about to go. It's funny. We're at the point in the day, we've been there for 3 days. We have been coaching and competing the entire time, me and my entire team, and most of us are totally done now. All of our students are done. We can go home. We can go hang out in Vegas. We can do whatever. But what are we doing? We're at mat number 4 watching Han, and sitting there and coaching him, sitting with Mark and getting to coach these matches. And he keeps winning. He keeps winning. He keeps winning. We get to the final. And who is the final against? We're tag team. We're trying to be one of the big teams in the Midwest, and then eventually in the country, and then the world. And who do we have sitting across from us? It's not Atos. It's not Art of Jiu-Jitsu. It's not Gracie Baja. It's not them. It's Daisy Fresh. And for you guys to understand, we fight the Daisy Fresh guys pretty much all the time. It's kind of this, locally, that's who we're expecting to be in the final when we're local at these tournaments. That's who we're expecting to have to beat. But when you're at Master Worlds, when you've spent all this money and there's all kinds of different peoples from all kinds of different countries, and you've got a guy from Mount Vernon who lives an hour and a half from me, who lives a few hours from Han, that's who we have in the final. That's the final that I think if you let any of us choose, our coaches or theirs, that's the finals that we want to see, right? We want to see that the same final that happens at a local like Fuji tournament is the same final that happens at a Master Worlds tournament. That shows that the jiu-jitsu in our area is really getting good. And man, I don't want to do this guy any disrespect. I know his last name was Sweeney. I don't remember what his first name was, but man, he blitzed early on Han in this match, and it was nuts. He was close to 12 different points, but Han endured. He survived it. He kept fighting, and the match continued. I think eventually we get to a point, I want to say Han's down 2-0. It might have been 0-0, but I know there is a point where he is down on points and he gets to one of his good positions and he uses it and he scores. And I won't tell you guys what that is, just in case you ever fight Han. I don't want you guys to be like, oh yeah, I studied him on that episode of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. But gets to his place and he scores. And there was this point, there's a minute left in the match, and he scores a second time, and there's a scramble and they stand up and they're disconnected. And he is 1 foot away from me, where I'm sitting and coaching, and the place is loud, and he stands up, and I go, Han, if you get to ... your position, you're a Master World Champion. And he looked at me and he said, yes, sir. Just like that. Like 5 fights in, he's down to the last minute. He's got to hold on. And this dude he's fighting as tough as nails is there to fight the entire time. And Han wins. He wins the division. He wins Master Worlds. He's a world champion. And there are a few lessons that we're going to pull from this. First off, listen to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, right? It'll make you a world champion. Second off, that's not true. But I really think that the schedule that was done, the training that was done, is what wins you that 4 minutes into the match, 1 minute left. You fought for 25 minutes that day against the toughest guys in your weight, in your age, in your belt. And you need to fight for that last minute. And that is really what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at the perfect training schedule today. It's going to be a random show. I have like 10 things written on my board that we'll continue to talk about. But we're going to kind of look at all these different factors, and there's going to be a bunch of callbacks to that story. I was thinking about, because really this whole story is my story of competing in Chicago Open, then going to Jiu-Jitsu Con. But I kind of wanted to tell it from Han's perspective first, mainly because Han actually won and I didn't. But because it was a really cool experience, it was a crazy good match, and all those fun things happen where we're fighting in the Midwest at Master Worlds. And yeah, that's where I thought we could start this one. Hey guys, really quick, I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you enjoy this episode, if you enjoy the show, be sure to give me a 5-star review, especially if you are on Apple Podcasts or if you're on Spotify. Those are the places that you listen. It really helps me. It helps the podcast so much if we get these 5-star reviews. And so if you guys are continuing to enjoy the podcast and you haven't done it yet, please give me that 5-star review. If you've done it already, I don't know, buy a new phone, create a new profile, give me a second 5-star review. I'm dying out here. Help me out. Let's get back to the episode. Let's start to look at why I took that trip to Chicago. First off, it was to compete. It's my first time doing a new weight class or an old weight class. I haven't done middleweight in, I think, like 5 or 6 years. I had been doing medium heavyweight, which is 195 pounds. And at Worlds last year, I got done competing, and I lost really early. And I watched my division, and I actually watched the division underneath me, the division over me. I just watched as much black belt adult jiu-jitsu as I could. That is actually where watching Worlds that year, I guess this would have been 2 Worlds ago. I didn't compete at the last Worlds. This would have been the one in December of 2021. But while I'm watching it, and I'm injured from my match, I know I'm going to have a while before I get to train again. I know I need to make some changes if I'm going to really be able to compete at this level. So what I start to do is I start to watch, and eventually that's where that idea of blitzing comes from, which is still the most famous episode of the show. If somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, I really like the show," they're going to tell me one of 2 episodes that they like. They will probably like one of my dad's episodes because that's why they found the show. They're a little older and they found the show like that. Or they're a competitor and they like the blitzing episodes. Or they're not, or they're older and they like the blitzing and the prevent episodes because it helps them understand why they're losing it a lot of times when people just go hard on them. But anyway, at that tournament, I really had a lot of big ideas. And one of the main ones was, I'm just too small for my division. I have to complete the puzzle that is the jiu-jitsu athlete. And to do that, I think you have to be an athlete. If we look back at the 3 Lenses book, and it's about the scientist, the artist, and the athlete way of training. I have always been able to do the scientist and the artist way of training. It's kind of how I came up doing jiu-jitsu because of the people that I was around. But the athlete part of training had always been something that I was missing. And so really for the last, I guess this has been quite a while now, 9 months, 10 months. I have been on this journey looking for the what I would call the perfect training schedule. And that is really what the Chicago trip was about to me, was going to New Breed, seeing how those guys are training. These guys are great athletes and great competitors. Going to Seraphin Jiu-Jitsu and seeing how they're training. Chris Wojcik is competing at the highest level. And so, and these guys are my friends too, so I can feel comfortable going in and asking questions and going in and stealing ideas from these guys, and of course sharing mine. And so that's what's really cool about the whole story that we'll go through is it's just a lot of idea sharing. It's a lot of, in my opinion, what jiu-jitsu should be, and we'll continue with it. So now we're at Chicago. I do Chicago Open. First weight cut wasn't the easiest for me. But I almost think a lot of times you need that. You need to feel what it feels like to, have to cut a little bit of water. You need to, that keeps you disciplined later on when you're going, oh, well, I could eat this piece of pizza, and it's like, no, you can't. You can, but you're not going to feel good. You're not going to perform at your best. And so as we look to what the perfect training schedule is, I think that it's always best to start these things with a goal. I'm going to really talk about the perfect training schedule for me being trying to be a better athlete of jiu-jitsu, right? That is what my training schedule was built for me. So anytime we're looking at the perfect anything, right, we always begin with the end in mind, right? That's how we look at this podcast. We begin with the end in mind. So for me, my end is I need to be a better jiu-jitsu athlete. I need to be healthy. I've been dealing with injuries on and off for 2 years that have really been significant. And I can't deal with those anymore. I need to be able to train. I need to be able to go 100% when I'm out there performing, when I'm out there competing. And really, those are my only two main goals from this whole finding the perfect training schedule. So for me, training schedule actually ended up starting with recovery. And this was a lesson that I learned from Mark Vives when I went and did the Stronghold, like they do a Midwest jiu-jitsu camp every year at a Stronghold BJJ in Wisconsin. Shout out to the Stronghold podcast. Shout that one. That podcast gets more shout outs than any other podcast on the show. But anyway, shout out to Wade and the Stronghold Jiu-Jitsu podcast. It's really getting a lot better too. I think you guys would love to check that out. But anyway, back to what I was saying. While I was there, I got to hang out with Mark Vives for a long time. And I really got to pick his brain on recovery. Keep in mind, this guy is in his late 40s. And he, as he says on the podcast, competes every weekend. I want to compete every weekend. I struggle to compete every 6 months. How do I get closer to competing every weekend? Well, I thought it'd be fun to start out with what I wasn't doing, and Mark was. And the biggest thing was he takes his rest and recovery seriously, and I don't. I take my training seriously. I take my sparring. I take my drilling. I take all of my other things seriously. But I actually wasn't taking my rest and recovery seriously. There were just little points throughout the week. For example, Chewy, Mark, and I were talking at a point, and Mark looked down, and we're just at the gym. I think we're watching UFC fights, and Mark looks down and he goes, "Hey, we should be rolling out right now." I was like, "Whoa. I guess we should be. I am really beat up," but that hadn't crossed my mind. That was all Mark was thinking about was, dude, we're sore. We should be recovering right now. What are we doing? And so we did. And you talk to these guys. You talk to Mark. You talk to Jeff Seraphin. You talk to Chris Wojcik. You talk to Mock. All four guys. When I said, what is the most important part of recovery? What did they say? Sleep. They all said rest. They all said sleep was the most important part of recovering. And really, they all four said that recovering was the most forgotten part of jiu-jitsu. So for most of us, This is just my opinion. I'm going to do a perfect training schedule, a perfect schedule episode eventually, where it's a little more defined. But for most of us, understanding rest and recovery is what we need for our perfect training schedule. Most of us train 4 times a week, 5 times a week, but we're actually probably training too hard. We're actually probably training too much. Keep in mind, these are my opinions just over the last few months and what I've seen. But a big thing that I've seen for most people is most of us are overtrained, especially when we sign up to compete. We do this thing where we sign up to compete and then we go, we're going to do a training camp. And for 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 weeks, whatever, we train really, really hard. And even to the lead up, and there are these days where we feel unbelievably good at jujitsu. And then there are days where we don't. And we usually don't even question why. Usually we blame ourselves, we blame our toughness, we blame our technique when I can't do things that I can normally do. But just like that statement was made earlier in the podcast by, I think it was Mark Vivas who said that when I asked him about overtraining. Hey, Mark, what is overtraining? It is when you cannot do things that you normally can do. It is where you cannot do things that you normally can do. I know that I wasn't the only one whose mind was blown from that statement. I know I wasn't the only one sitting on the couch, sitting on the chair going, so when I can't outside pass, when I can't be dynamic and jump side to side on people, and I want to, and I'm trying to, and I'm going, man, it feels like my legs are in quicksand. My legs, my hips aren't activated. That's why I would always say I don't have my hips today for some reason. What if I was overtrained every single time that was happening? I don't know that I was. And I don't know that was this huge diminishing return every time. But I know with that little bit of information that Mark gave us, I know I didn't feel right when I would go in and I would start trying to pass and I would go, nope, today's a off my knees / knee cut day. I can't be dynamic with my passing. I shouldn't have to do that when I'm thinking about performing, right? Some days you're going to be beat up, but you still want to train. And then you work your inside passing, right? And you work it not so hard. For us, we play designated winner on those positions. But just that little idea, that little thought of maybe you are overtrained. We act like this is unheard of in jiu-jitsu. We act like overtraining is crazy in jiu-jitsu. So now let's look at some ideas on training method. I know with the perfect schedule, really all I talked about was train a lot, but make sure you're resting and recovering, have a goal, and that's what your training should be. But we've pretty much been talking about training method for the last 150 episodes, right? We've been focused on all these different ways to train. So you at a point have probably figured out what works for you. For me, what works for me is training hard 2, maybe 3 times a day or a week. And what I've found with 2 or 3 times a week is I actually feel like myself in all 2 or 3 of those training sessions. Now, in between Chicago Open and Jiu-Jitsu Con, there was like a 21-day break in between. I trained while I was in Chicago for those 3 days that I stayed there. And then when I got home, so for 17, 16 days in the lead up, I did not do a single round of jiu-jitsu. My body was just too beat up. I was not recovered for 16 days. And I think it was a combination of overtraining and the weight cut. But I could go in and start trying to move and I could feel it in my legs. Oh, I'm not there. I'm not there. I'm not there. And as I started to get closer to jiu-jitsu, I started to go, hey, maybe I am there. I'm starting to feel good. But the goal is to feel good at Jiu-Jitsu Con. It's not to work myself to death so much that then I can go, well, now I'm confident in my prep. It's not as much about the 6-week prep as we act like it is when we're going to compete. It is more about it's more about how good you are at jiu-jitsu and what shape you're in. the mindset you show up that day. Those really are just the three things that matter, right? We focus so much on those 6 to 12 week training camps and being in just phenomenal shape and being at the optimal weight that we normally aren't at. And we expect everything to just be the same. And so we'll get to this actually next week, but something that was really helpful for me in Jiu-Jitsu Con was something that I talked to my friend Chris Paynes about. He said, yes, so many people, when you go to compete, they're so focused on what their opponent's going to do and what's going to happen. And like, oh, he likes this, he likes this, he likes this. He goes, those things are only reactions, right? He said, you don't think about them in the gym. You just react to them in the gym. So you don't know that you're going to be put in lasso guard until you are actually put in lasso guard. You don't know that you're going to be put in single leg X until you're actually put there. But so often we will go to compete and go, this guy has a great lasso guard. And then we drill lasso passing for the whole month and lead up to the tournament or the fight or whatever. And we are like, we're gonna pass his guard. And then the guy goes and shoots a double leg on you, and everything was ruined. And you weren't focused on reacting. I wasn't focused on reacting. We were just there to defend lasso guard, and we never even saw that position. Now, a better way to look at it, and this is what Chris helped me, and this really, I performed twice in the last month, once at Chicago Open and once at Jiu-Jitsu Con, and I got third at both tournaments. Actually lost to the same guy at both tournaments, but I felt like a different person at both tournaments. And the biggest difference for me was that instead of focusing that my first opponent, he actually did have an amazing lasso guard, and I didn't think twice about it. Maybe if I had, I wouldn't have been there for so long, but I didn't think twice about it. I go, I know how to react to lasso guard. I know how to play jiu-jitsu from lasso guard. But what I haven't been doing is my own jiu-jitsu. I haven't been going out and being Josh McKinney. And it's been a long time since I've went out and just performed my jiu-jitsu and said, hey, I don't care how I'm going to have to react. I'm here to make three things happen. And for me, the first one was my initial grip fight. I'm going to win the inside grip fight. He's not going to get a clean guard pull. And I made that happen. And it was me focusing on offense. It wasn't me focusing on his best position, right? Little random thought on mindset. But now let's look at training method for competition. Hey guys, just wanted to interrupt really quick to tell you about our newest instructional at simplifyingjiujitsu.com. The Trinity of Guard Passing is supposed to be out today. It isn't. It's not out today. I just with this episode, I tell you guys about all the traveling I've been doing, all the competition and stuff. That's really why it is not out yet. I just have not had time to get it finished, and hopefully will in the next 2 weeks. Definitely will in the next 2 weeks have time, but does that mean I'll utilize that time to finish it? I don't know. We will see. But what is important is that I have a free gift for you guys, and that free gift is the 3 lenses. The 3 lenses is my newest ebook on learning jiu-jitsu. If you want to know what training method fits your jiu-jitsu and fits the way you learn and best train jiu-jitsu, then you need to sign up for the 3 lenses ebook. The link is in the description. You can also go to simplifyingjiujitsu.com/learn. Let's get back to the episode. So we understand that recovery is going to be important. We understand that rest is important. We understand that it's about feeling great right when you compete. Even the morning of, you may mentally not feel great. You may feel really bad. You may struggle mentally, right? The lead up to the tournament, you could struggle physically, but we should be focused on trying to be at 100% on that day. So often we understand that, like that is the goal, to feel 100%, but we don't usually we don't do the things that are necessary to get us there. We don't rest. Even in the last 2 weeks before your tournament, I have this argument now, a new theory now, that you shouldn't train live unless you feel 100%. in those 2 weeks leading up to your tournament. Obviously, if you have a nagging injury that you're going to have to deal with at the tournament, that's different. But meaning like, I should be able to crush the guys that I normally crush. And if I'm not doing that, most likely I'm overtrained, and it's only going to hurt me mentally to keep training overtrained. And it's only going to hurt me physically for the tournament because I'm going to be overtrained there. And so now let's talk about, I talked a lot about rest, recovery. Let's talk about overtraining and the people that say that it doesn't exist, because you will hear people talk about that. Oh, you just train through it. You just train more. I think there is a really big gap in understanding for a lot of us in jiu-jitsu. And I think it begins and ends with drug use. I think that there are so many people that are at the highest levels of jiu-jitsu that are on steroids that it would blow yours and my mind. And this is my opinion. This is my opinion, being a guy that competes at the highest level of jiu-jitsu. Okay. I'm not saying I beat the guys at the highest level of jiu-jitsu, but I am there. Look at my podium that I'm standing on at Jiu-Jitsu Con. I've got the #1 pound for pound guy at standing in the first place spot. But because steroid use is so rampant in jiu-jitsu, the training method has been built around steroid use. The training method of jiu-jitsu is built around drug use. That is why when I go talk to Jeff Serafin and Chris Wojcik, they are not training 3 times a day. But that was what you were supposed to do, right? You can Google, like search on YouTube, how do I get better at jiu-jitsu? One of the top videos, one of the most watched videos is a steroid user telling you that the best way to get better is training twice, train 3 times a day. That's how you should get better. That's not true. We have to understand, if we're going to be natural athletes, and you guys don't have to be natural athletes, but I am going to be a natural athlete. We have to understand that they are 2 different sports. I'm not saying that don't compete against steroid users. I have a show about being natural and being kind of chubby and trying to beat steroid users, right? But I'm not going to beat them at their own game. I'm not going to beat them at the game of physicality. I'm not going to beat them at these days where we're maxing out on deadlifts every night after training 3 or 4 times a day, right? It's just not possible. I'm just a different person, right? You have to understand that. If everybody that I learned from, everybody who I'm trying to mimic, is on something that I am not, and that something allows them to train more. It not only allows them to train more, but it also encourages you to train more. So like people will say, oh, well, these guys that are on steroids, they still put in the work. Yes, steroids literally give you the drive to put in more work, the energy to put in more work, and the recovery. We are not playing the same sport. I know, like, I always worry that I come off as somebody who's complaining about this. I don't care less. I really could not care less that people are on or not on. The problem becomes when we think that we are the same, that I have to train like these guys. Okay, so you understand, for 10 minutes of jiu-jitsu, if I am fighting a guy that is freak strong, okay, for whatever reason, let's not even say that they're on steroids, but if I ignore that, if I ignore the physicality aspect of jiu-jitsu and I go, I'm going to fight this guy hard for 10 minutes, I'm going to lose 100% of the time, unless the guy doesn't have any cardio. I am going to lose if I fight him with physicality for the whole 10 minutes. I've got about 3 minutes where my physicality can match or beat his. 3 minutes total for the whole 10-minute match. I have learned this because I have competed at this high level against people that are superhuman. So understand, I know this is just, I'm not really giving you a huge way of like how to exit this thought of like, hey, this is how you should change your thought process. But just keep in mind, in jujitsu, there are people that are on things that allow them to train ways that may not be the most conducive for them, allow them to get way more recovery than you normally could. And so maybe you're not mentally weak. Maybe everyone else is just on drugs. Maybe you are mentally weak, right? But that's kind of my thought on training hard for competition, is understanding your recovery, understanding what the other people are doing may not be the best for you simply because they're doing things that you aren't. Now let's look at some mindset. Here's one more mindset that was really helpful for me. Obviously, I told you guys about the Chris Payne's one. Man, the mindset from Mock about wanting to be great. If you guys have not heard that episode, first like 10 minutes of the episode before the first commercial break, the sound is kind of low still because I had to use our like backup audio. I had to use the whole room audio instead of our mic's audio. But it really gets going after that anyway. The podcast really starts rolling after that. But anyway, we get to that point of, do you want to be great? And for me, that's such a good word. That is such a word that is not used enough. Like good enough is something that we think about for our jujitsu. We think about for our businesses, our jobs, our lives. But sometimes, I actually used to have my principal used to always say, good enough is neither. It's neither good nor enough. And yes, that sometimes for perfectionists, you should be okay with good enough, right? For me, there are times that I should be okay with good enough. But when it comes to my jujitsu, when it comes to the things that are important, when it comes to my gym, when it comes to my podcast, being great is a lot more relevant. It's a lot more important to me. And I mean, for you guys who listen to the podcast, would you rather the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show be good? Would it be a hidden gem that you will continue to listen to for a long period of time? Or will it be great? Will it be one that you go, yeah, I listened to it before it was good. I listened to it before it was great. I listened to it before it was the biggest jiu-jitsu podcast, right? There's something, and maybe it's not going to be. Maybe it's going to be something that I have 48 episodes left in me, and we get to episode 200, and I go, hey, it's just never going to be great, and we quit. I won't do that, but it could happen. But I would at least be happy that during these next 48 episodes, I was chasing greatness and not sitting back and saying, well, it's good enough. This podcast is good enough. To me, next week's episode, as long as I can get the editing done on the sound, next week's episode is going to be great. I have Charles Harriott on, who you guys have never met before, and I have Chris Payne, who you guys have met a bunch of times on, and we do an in-person 3-person podcast. I've never done that before, and the flow on it, the podcast on it is so good, to a point where as soon as we got done, Bryce was producing for me. Bryce Allen of Allen Brothers Jiu-Jitsu was producing for me, and he like, we get done and we look at each other and like, don't say anything. Like, did you see that? Like, that was kind of crazy, right? And then as soon as Charles and Chris walk out of the door, we're like, 3-person in person. This is the podcast. This is what we need to be doing. And it was super cool. It was a really cool feeling. If I wasn't chasing greatness, I would have gone, 3-person podcast. That was really cool. And then went back to the normal stuff. But this time, when you're looking to be better, when you're saying, hey, this podcast is good, but it's not enough. It's not as good as it will be. My jiu-jitsu is good, but it's not as good as it can be. It can be better. My understanding can be more. I can be great. When you do that, you see things differently. We see that episode of 3 people and we go, that episode, that there were glimpses of that episode that was great. How can we reproduce that? Because that's the real goal, right? The perfect training schedule. The goal is to be great. Whether that means for me being a world champion, being a better jiu-jitsu athlete, being whatever. It just means that I'm trying to be great. I'm trying to be the best that I can at that. And so I think this will probably be a good place to finish this episode. When you're out and you're looking at your jiu-jitsu, when you're out, you're looking at your gym that you own, you're looking at the podcast that you started, you're looking at whatever it is that you have, whatever it is that you put yourself into, you put your heart and soul into your art. For a lot of us, it is our jiu-jitsu. Focus on being great. Focus on saying, hey, this is fun. This is awesome. This is I love doing this. But I also owe it to jiu-jitsu to be great. I owe it to, for me, I think like I owe it to my wife for this podcast to be great. She has let me put in 152 episodes, probably 300, 400 plus hours, 500 plus hours of work on this podcast. Probably actually, now that I think about it, even a lot more than that. But all this time on my podcast that's produced no money, I owe it to her to make the podcast great, right? I owe it to myself. I've put in 14 years of my life into jiu-jitsu, into competing. I started competing 3 months in. I owe it to myself to be great as a competitor. I owe it to myself to be the best competitor that I can be. And that's what we'll leave you guys with today is be great. That's all I have for you guys. And that is the episode. Thank you guys for checking this one out. Yeah, I love doing the random shows. They're fun. I always think when I do episodes like this, like I should have a random show once a week and an interview once a week. Not a random show, a solo podcast once a week and an interview once a week. But I'm not there yet. Soon we will be, I promise. I promise. You guys have been so patient. I am always telling you about the next cool thing that we're going to be doing, and you guys are never pressuring me. You don't put all kinds of stress on me. Sometimes I will get a message and somebody be like, hey, Josh, you said this would be out like 3 years ago, and it's still not out yet. But I'm working on it, right? I appreciate you guys letting me be me. And I also, I really appreciate at Chicago Open. Obviously, it makes sense at Chicago Open where I know a lot of people already and then I start a podcast. But like even at Jiu-Jitsu Con, people are actually coming up to me and talking to me about the podcast in a way that is like these people actually listen to the podcast. A lot of people know that you're a podcaster and like, oh yeah, huge fan, but they're not a fan. They've never listened to an episode. But it was really cool getting to actually meet and talk to people. And so if you're still listening to this and you're one of the guys that sees me at a tournament, never worry about just coming up and saying hi. I really, even though when I'm at a jiu-jitsu tournament, usually I just coach the entire day because it's what I like to do. Even if I don't have a ton of competitors, I will just coach friends and people that I know just because it keeps me excited, keeps me having fun. But so never feel weird about coming up and just saying hi. Always happy to hear that somebody likes the show. It's really cool when you get that and you never got it before. Somebody walking up and actually saying like, hey, I've never met you before. I listened to you on an audio only platform. And because I found you on Instagram or whatever, I know what you look like enough. And I feel confident coming up and saying hi. And then I see what your views are on YouTube and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it's not like he's busy, it's not like anyone's it's not like anyone else is going to be talking to him. And so it's always cool when I do get those one or two people that want to come up to me and say hi at a tournament. Just know it makes my day probably way more than it makes your day. But I just want to thank you guys for the continued support. Thank you guys for all the 5-star reviews. If you look, we really, on certain platforms, unlike Spotify, we really have more 5-star reviews, or very close to the same amount of 5-star reviews, as podcasts that we aren't as good at, or as good as, right? So that's really exciting too. But that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Hope that you guys have been liking some of the interviews. I have a really cool one next week for you guys. And most importantly, I hope today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys. Hey guys, Josh here again. I noticed that the podcast is over, but you are still listening. So you might still be in search of some really good free content that the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show provides. So if that is the case, if you guys are looking for some solo episodes where you can learn more about efficiency and effectiveness in Jiu-Jitsu, I would highly recommend 2 episodes. The first is episode 111, and that is on blitzing. It's this idea of pacing that most people, even black belts, don't think about. And then episode 129 is on designated winner. It is this new training concept that we have been doing at my team. We've been talking about a lot on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. I've actually been traveling the country and teaching this training method. And so as we continue to grow the show, I think that is going to be the episode that I push most people to. It's episode 129, designated winner, learning to master the flow. This is kind of the missing piece between drilling and flowing and positional sparring. You kind of get to combine all 3 of those things with designated winner and get the effects of all 3 of those things with designated winner. Also, if you guys are interested, if you're looking for some more deep dives into specific things in jiu-jitsu, you can always go to simplifyingjujitsu.com, where I have all of my instructionals, all of my dad's instructionals, and actually a few from my coach Kyle Watson, my friend Nick Sanders, John Prine, really some amazing black belts instructing you at simplifyingjujitsu.com. Also at simplifyingjujitsu.com, I have a free ebook for you guys. It is called The 3 Lenses. It is the 3 lenses that people look through to learn jiu-jitsu. Most of us only ever see or learn from one of the lenses. And simply by adding the extra perspective of the other 2, you will triple how quickly you get good at jiu-jitsu, especially how well you understand jiu-jitsu. And that is what this free ebook really provides, is a very good way for you to understand the language, understand what's happening, understanding why you are getting better, or more importantly, why you're not getting better. And you can use this free ebook and it will help you diagram what you want to getting to the goals you want to get to. And so that is all I have for you guys. Make sure to check out Designated Winner. Make sure to check out everything that I have at simplifyingjujitsu.com, whether it is free or it is paid. You can also follow me on Instagram at the Josh McKinney. If you ever have any questions or comments, or you want to send a suggestion for a Suck Less Saturday episode, you can email me, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com. I read all those emails. Sometimes they get repetitive, so I combine 5 or 6 emails to be a Suck Less Saturday episode. But keep those emails coming so I can keep producing great jiu-jitsu content, and I can keep hearing from the people who actually enjoy the show and want to keep hearing the jiu-jitsu content that I produce. Have a great day, guys. I hope this last little few minute clip helps you suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day.